Welcome to the Men of Iron podcast. My name is Jeff Reimold, and I'm here with my guy, J Dub. Justin, how you doing?
I'm good. El Jefe.
Yes.
Sorry, I wanted to give you a nickname right off the bat.
I love it.
You've probably heard that before, though.
I have.
Right.
I actually was Jefe in Spanish class.
So there sense. That's not really a nickname. It's actually just your name.
It's my name, but we're going with it. But can you believe it's February already?
Very quickly going through this year.
Oh my word! Yeah. Are you a resolution guy, or how's that looking you?
Yeah, I do. I like to be organized. I like to vision cast and reflect. So yeah, it's there's nothing magical about just going into a new year. I think people get lost in that and like, oh, I've got to do all this new things. It's nothing actually magical, but it's a good natural like marker, right? To look back and look forward. So I like it. You?
Yeah, I'm not like a resolution guy. I'm more of like, I like to look at either a behavior or something like that I want to focus on. Mm-hmm. So yeah, but I have noticed already that the gyms are starting to thin out, and that's the funny thing about resolutions, right?
Die quickly.
The thing that I love is we're going to be talking about some great topics this month. Yeah. We're in this series. It's called Faith Conversations for Men, and we're going to kick it off. Kick it off by talking about being a Christian at work. Mm. It's like a pretty big topic. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, some people, when they talk about faith at work, like it literally can get them in trouble.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
And I know people handle it a lot of different ways, but, just so everybody kind of has an idea of where we stand. For me, I've been in the professional world for 32 years.
Whoa.
15 of them have been in non-Christian organizations and the rest with Christian organizations. What's that breakdown look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, most of my adult career has been in the Christian workspace. So I did a lot of like secular jobs in high school, college, early, coming out of those two seasons, but been a youth pastor. I've been at 2 Christian nonprofits. So I feel like most of my adult life has actually been in Christian environments, which have their own challenges that I know that we're going to talk about. So it's not just like, I'm in the clear.
I mean, that leads me right into the first thing is like in a Christian organization, what are some of the things that you think are challenges for there?
Yeah, I think complacency is a big one. Just assuming that because I work at a Christian organization or a church or nonprofit or whatever it is, that like my personal walk with the Lord is just somehow covered, and like I don't have to be working on myself and pursuing God because I'm doing the Lord's work. And I think that's a big one, like just personally. And then I think it's easy to, just as a culture, can be the same thing. Our culture is good and we're doing things right because we're a Christian nonprofit. We're a church, especially. Yeah. And I think even as someone who's participating in that, also the flip side too can be you like expect perfection. So there's the side of like complacency. Yeah. But there's also the side of like no grace because you're like, well, this should be perfect.
I'm a super Christian.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. No, the funny thing is it's estimated that up to 90% of Christians work in non-Christian work environments.
That's a lot.
That's a lot, man.
Which is great. I think that's awesome.
It's a great because you talk about mission field and you talk about opportunity, but man, there's a lot of things that can happen that can stunt you, that can get you off track, all those kind of things in those scenarios. And one of the things that I was really wanting to focus on a little bit was like this sort of personality trap of, when you kind of have a tendency to be like the people you're around. And, the idea of hiding your faith because you work in an environment where everybody's against it, or, hey, I work with a bunch of people who talk about politics all the time, so I talk about politics all the time, or, those kind of things. And I think that siloing of your faith is pretty prevalent in those scenarios. So why do you think it's so easy for us to do that, where we just don't include our faith in scenarios where there's not other Christians around us?
Yeah, I think it's, there's some like psychology probably to it, that, wanting to be accepted, wanting to be, like you said, like the others around me. I mean, that's just a natural human tendency to want to be part of other people and be accepted and valued. And I think so. Whatever mirroring others around you is just a natural thing. So if that's not happening for them, you're not participating as well. And then I think when it comes to, boy, my faith though could stir things up. Like it could not only is no one else doing it, but it could actually set me apart and push me out of the group. And I think people are afraid of what that looks like. Don't want to be, left out, judged. And you could be working in an environment where you're like, I'm not sure if this is going to get, like you said before, this might get me in trouble. I don't know what I can say, what I can do. Just easier to just not have it at all. Just keep it at home.
Yeah. I think I heard a stat a while ago that said that 1% of Christians talk to non-Christians more than once per year about their faith.
1%, less than 1%. Talk to one
person who is not a Christian about becoming one.
It's a very low
per
number.
year.
That's a very low.
It's kind of telling though, because, and I think, one of the big things that you can see happen in a lot of scenarios is fear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Fear's a big one.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's some cool scriptures that we can talk about, that kind of give us a little bit of light on this. And I particularly like Matthew 10:16, where Jesus is actually sending the disciples out into hostile territory to spread the gospel, to tell them about the gospel message. And he says this to them. He says, I am sending you out as sheep among wolves. Therefore, be shrewd as a snake and innocent as a dove. Now, for most of us, when we just try to think through what shrewd as a snake and innocent as a dove is, it's not like normal language for us. So what do you think he's talking about here when he's talking about shrewd as a snake?
Yeah. I mean, I think they're obviously opposites. You think of a snake as being, hunter and on the prowl and it doesn't always get great connotation. I mean, you don't think of a snake as being cuddly and warm and graceful. It's like, shrewd. That's a great description. So that's an interesting description to say, be shrewd as a snake, which I think what is it? Yeah, I'm going to throw it back to you as well, because I think Christians should be more, we should be the dove part for sure, right? We should be innocent as a dove. That makes sense. Okay. Yeah. But why is Jesus telling them to be shrewd as a snake if the snake is associated with kind of that darker side of life? So what do you think on that?
I mean, that's exactly what my first thought was, he talks about treading on the head of snakes and these kind of things. So that it was interesting. So I looked up the word shrewd because I think that's really the key. And shrewd is having sharp powers of judgment. That's what shrewd means. That was a surprising definition for me because I knew about what it meant, but I think being careful about how and what you say to people is really something that, we see so often when people are picketing and saying, you're going to hell and all these kind of weird, crazy things that they can do where they're being super judgmental. I think Jesus is very clear saying, think about how you're approaching these people. And that's to me what he's talking about here. A snake is a little bit like not sneaky, but wise in how it moves. And that's what the shrewd kind of stands out to me. So obviously he also says innocent as a dove. What do you think about that one?
Yeah, I feel like that's a little bit easier to grasp for the traditional sense of what it looks like to be a Christ follower. I think of Romans 12 where he's talking about don't repay evil for evil. Consider what is right in the eyes of everyone. If it's impossible on your part, live at peace with everyone. Which again, I like the wording of that too, is if it's possible, do your role. What is your role to be a peacemaker? And being able to offer that to those around you. Now they can reject that. That's right. Their response is out of our control, but to go in and be wise, shrewd, tactful in our approach as a snake, but as a positive way. but at the same time balance the grace and the peace of Christ. We're trying to build relationships.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not, we're going into, and this is, goes into a lot of different, dynamics for the Christian faith. We're not trying to go out there and win arguments. A lot of Christians think that's the call.
Right,
That's the
yeah.
mission. We're going in there to win arguments of truth, to beat back the culture, and we're going to prove that Scripture is right. And this, like, that's just really, getting off the mission. Like, 'cause Jesus calls us to go win souls, like go bring people into the kingdom. Like, so how do you do that? With wisdom and grace? Wisdom of a snake, but the grace and the peace of a lamb, or a dove. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think, it also is, you're not going to talk to people and be like, well, this verse says this and this verse says this. Like, you have to have some wisdom there, and talking through biblical morals, principles-based teaching and conversations, asking good questions. These are some things to me that is what Jesus was trying to get at here. Like, there's ways to witness to people and to speak to them in the place where you're at that isn't offensive. It is trust building, and it is, building up and creating relational equity and those kind of things. So I think, to me, that's definitely what Jesus was referring to.
Do you have again, like examples, like for both of us, what would that look like for you at different times, in the workplace, in a secular setting, since 90% of the guys probably listening are in that category? What does that look like?
I mean, I'll be honest, I became a Christian a little bit later in life. So I had work experience while I was a non-Christian, and I had Christian coworkers who would come at me like a little aggressive, and they would be all about those Bible verses. And, honestly, I knew some of the Bible verses, but they just weren't connecting to me. So it was almost like it pushed me away a little bit. So I just think it's so important to really have that trust. Like, if someone's talking to me and they have trust in the relationship built up already, I'm more inclined to listen to something that's a little more aggressive and edgy compared to my own thoughts, right? So I think, it really comes down to, are you being a good friend at work? Are you like able to relate to them and just be a light? You don't have to, be a theologian to be a light. Yeah. It's just understanding the principles and loving Jesus in your way and letting people see that and not be compromising. Yeah. I think that's kind of going back to what we said earlier. People have a tendency to sort of hold back their faith when they're in a non-faith environment, but you can't compromise on that. So
yeah, I think like being real and being intentional, but being real at the same time, I think, and there's a balance. I think you go to, like you brought up, you can be over the top, maybe too intentional and too aggressive. Yeah. And then people, and I'm not saying there's not any way that God uses that, but for the most part, people get turned away by that. But you can be real about your faith and still be approachable. You like Christians can still, go, we can enjoy the Super Bowl coming up this, like we can be into sports, we can be into, we can talk about politics and culture with reason and rationale and be approachable without being compromising. And I think the times where I've made been intentional in workplaces where it's not a Christian environment, like still being able to, bringing my Bible along, like maybe before work starts, doing my devotions in the locker room, beforehand. And that I wasn't in someone's face. I didn't stand in the front of the door so that everyone saw me, but like I've had a lot of relationships in non-Christian workplaces where they've seen me do other things, or they've heard me talk in different ways, and we've opened up conversations about faith that are real, because we were real friends, and I wasn't some strange, unicorn of a person trying to be perfect or always had a comeback. And I don't know. I think that balance is important.
That's so good, man. And that authentic faith, like, don't be a poser.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? People will see right through it and it's going to turn them off. So you can't be that guy, like you said, standing at the doorway with the Bible. Like it's kind of a funny scene to me almost, because it's so absurd to like go that route. But yeah, in Scripture, there are a couple of guys who really, in the Old Testament that we talk about, that have experience in this. And we're talking about Joseph and Daniel. We don't have time to get into their stories in depth, but honestly, they had this thing happen where they were taken into strange lands and surrounded by people of other religions and things like that, and yet they still gained favor. What do you think were a couple of the things that you could pinpoint that might have been why they got that favor?
Yeah, I think both of them showed they had integrity. They both showed integrity in both their stories. They both worked really hard, and they were both loyal. And they also held to their convictions. So they were able to do excellent work.
Yeah.
You know, they were doing their best. They made impact, but they stuck to their integrity and their principles that the Lord called them to. And so that found favor, and that gave them a platform to point others to the Lord.
Yeah. Know? I think that's really a good point, because even though they were in this, like they were captives and in different senses, but and yet they still did the things that they were asked to do, didn't compromise, and were authentic. I think those are so key. Yeah. And honestly, you know, if you're looking for some extra credit, like go ahead and do a little digging in on Joseph and Daniel. I think you'll be surprised at some of those characteristics and how obvious they are when you're thinking about it from a like Christian workplace kind of stance. But one of the things that we want to do is always leave you guys with like something to think about as you go throughout your week or whatever. And so we have 3 questions this week that I really want you to think through, ponder, process, and they're simple. That's the nice thing about this. It's like simple little questions. So question 1 is, why did he call me there? Like, why did he call you to the place that you're working? Number 2 is, what's my purpose there? Like, once I understand why he brought me here, what am I supposed to achieve while I'm here? And then, am I representing Christ well? If you are a true Christ follower, that should be your heart's desire in every environment. But those 3 questions, I really feel like will help you start to navigate what it's like to work in a Christian, or not be a Christian in the workplace. So yeah, we're so thankful you guys have been with us today. Hopefully you've picked up a thing or two that you can take with you and apply. You know, next week we're going to come back and we're continuing the series, and we're talking about dealing with church hurt. Church hurt's a big one, dude. Yeah. Like that's going to be a big topic. So make sure you tune in next week. Thank you for listening, and God bless.
Hey, thanks for listening to our Men of Iron podcast. If you enjoyed that episode, make sure you go to menofiron.org, or you can hit the subscribe button. You can ring the notification bell. That way you don't miss out on any future episodes. But again, thanks for checking out Men of Iron.